fucking pinned him up against the wall, stuck my SE8 in his mouth, pulled it for its first pressure on the trigger. I said, you fuck up and make me look bad, I will kill you. Interesting stuff, you know what I mean? You know, my first memories as a kid is the old bill bin at the door.
Right, okay.
You know, and my mum screaming and understanding that my dad had been killed in a car crash.
Yeah, so really, I always like to get started like early life, really. You know, how you grew up and stuff like that, really.
Okay.
Purely because I find it interesting how you then went into what you ended up going into.
Yes, yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I was born in Bletchley, so Milton Keynes born and bred, really.
Yeah.
You know, born in Bletchley, lived in Leighton Buzzard.
Yep.
So on the Hockliffe Road. Early memories, not so great. You know, yeah, it was a bit of a turbulent upbringing.
Yeah.
You know, my first memories as a kid is the old bill bin at the door.
Right. Okay.
You know, and my mum screaming and carrying on. And it turned out, what I thought was my dad had died in a lorry crash. He was a coalman. So for many years I was under the understanding that my dad had been killed in a car crash. Yeah. Turns out it wasn't the truth. My mum had been having an affair for fucking years, and my older sister, I've got two sisters, older one, younger one, was Cyril, the chap that died in a lorry accident, his daughter, and myself and my younger sister were Harry's kids, who turned out to be my dad.
Yeah.
You know, so mum had been having an affair, bless her, and so you know that was my first one. I remember, right, you know, female officer, male officer, and you know, mum screaming her head off.
Yeah.
You know, so you know, dealing with that as a kid, you know, and subsequently in later years going through therapy and things like that, you understand how traumatic these things can be.
Yeah.
Subconsciously, you don't think that it's you know affecting you,
yeah.
But it does have you know an effect until we kind of talk it through and understand what's going on with things. But yeah, so I brought up in Leighton Buzzard, went to school in Leighton Buzzard.
And what age was that? Sorry.
Oh God, crikey.
That's like proper early.
Yeah, early, you know, little. Yeah, so I was born in 1973, so I'm 51 today.
Yeah, happy birthday.
Thank you very much. You know, it's as I say, school in Leighton Buzzard, got friends in Leighton Buzzard.
Yeah.
You know, and my dad, who you know, obviously Cyril had died. You know, my mum's husband, and my dad started coming round. And Dad was Harry Smith. He was from the Elephant Castle in London.
Okay.
Used to wear a real camel coat, all the old Tom on.
Oh,
you know what I mean? Always suited and booted, V8 Daimler.
Okay.
You know, then it didn't mean much to me. But looking back now, I'm like, crikey, I used to run boozers and home pubs.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? You know, and so very much a bit of a character.
Yeah.
You know. Anyway, we, you know, as kids growing up in that buzzard, and then, you know, getting into normal scrapes that kids do. Spent most of the time out playing, you know, until it got dark, and then we'd come back in.
Yeah.
You know, no computers back then, no mobile phones. Well, they did have computers, you know, Atari ST or something like that. You know what I mean? You know, or the ZX Spectrum. You know.
Because I was still brought up on the as soon as the street lights come on, you go home.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, we as I say, it was just you know a given that you'd be out.
Yeah.
You know, up to no good. So a bit different contrast from today's kids. But you know, if you wanted to use a phone, there was a phone at the top of South Street. You put 2 pence in to make a phone. You know what I mean? You know, proper old. You know what I mean? You know, hold on a minute. You know what I mean? Got a leg up the road to make a phone. Unbelievable. You know, compared to now.
Yeah.
You know, but as I say, it made sure that we were out and about and fit and healthy. You know, as kids. Then I remember. You know, we moved out to Spain.
Okay.
I think my old man was having a few tax issues. So we went and lived in Calpe, on the Costa Blanca, and you know, villa, swimming pool. Me and my sisters went to private school. We had to jump on a train each morning, go through the mountains on the train, and it was funny as you like, because you know, you could sit on the steps at the side of the train. And you're going for the mountains, no health and safety.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you know, we were just kids. My sister, my older sister, was in charge, and you know, me and my sister, we'd go to private school, and then come back, and we'd spend the rest of the time in the swimming pool. And you know, Mum and Dad were permanently drunk, You know what I mean? Yeah. So mum and dad were permanently drunk. I always remember my old man, he would be driving back from town and he'd put his foot out and absolutely steaming.
Yeah.
They'd wake us up. My older sister would babysit, and they'd go to a place called El Faro, the Lighthouse, which is an Englishly bar and restaurant.
Yeah.
And they'd come back at 1 o'clock in the morning, wake us up, put us in the motor and drive back so they can continue drinking. We'd keep on the benches in the bloody boozer. You know what I mean? So no wonder in later years I liked to fucking drop the alcohol. It was in my blood.
Yeah.
But yeah, so eventually my parents decided to come back from Spain, and that was a bit of a confusing time in my life because we moved from one place to Liverpool, went to school in Liverpool, London, all over. We'd moved and moved, and it was all pretty up in the air. I don't know what was going on financially with mum and dad and all of that, but I just knew that I was getting uprooted constantly.
Yeah.
And having to go to different schools in different areas and all this type of stuff. And then, part of you look back and think, Christ, why can't my parents be like normal parents and just live in one place, be, satisfied with that and comfortable, but no, they just did what they did, But hey, I can't, I shouldn't complain really because, I look back to the, time in the sunshine, in the swimming pool all the time.
Yeah.
Fantastic,
And how long were you out there?
A couple of years.
Okay.
Yeah. But I kept in touch with all my pals in Leighton Buzzard, and I'm still pals now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? As I say, from when we came back, eventually we ended up settling in Milton Keynes, and I ended up at Lovat School in Newport Pagnell.
Okay.
And then at Ousdale as a teenager. And it's there I got into my rugby. We had some fantastic PE teachers, absolute superstars.
Yeah.
And they were banging at their rugby, all of them. And so they got the rugby team up and running. And the next thing, one of my pals, Dave Williams, was playing for Leighton Buzzard. And his dad Hugh was the secretary of the club. And obviously I just learned rugby and everything else at school. And then the next thing I know, they'd asked me to play at Leighton Buzzard.
Yeah.
So I started playing for Leighton. And I never looked back. And rugby days were fantastic. You know what I mean? I'd jump on a train in Milton Keynes on a Sunday morning. If I weren't staying over at my mates on a Saturday night, I'd jump on a train Sunday morning. Down to Leighton Buzzard, and Hugh would pick me up with little Dave, and we'd go and play rugby and play all over the show. It was fantastic. I really remember that. It was fond of memories.
Yeah.
So
I didn't realise that's how long you knew Dave.
Yeah, even before that, me and Dave used to go to play school together.
Really?
But not Dave Williams. Well, Dave Williams I've known since probably about the age of 8.
Okay.
But Dave, because we all lived, Ockcliffe Road was there.
Yeah.
And straight across from me was Dave Birchall.
Okay.
Literally lived across the road. And then Dave Williams lived on another street, but we're all in close vicinity, so we all knew each other. But me and Dave Birchall used to go to play school together.
Yeah.
And then me and Dave Williams, we ended up playing rugby together for years. And and we're still pals now.
Yeah, I love Dave.
So he's funny.
He's a character, and he's funny.
I tell you what, he's a tasty little fella, like, you know what I mean? He don't suffer fools gladly. He's very humble.
Yeah.
Ever so. You know what I mean? But he can have a tear up when he needs to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but as I say, as kids we grew up, and we were all getting in scrapes and all that type of stuff, as kids do. And as I say, we'd come back from Spain, living, going to school. School with me, I was always capable of doing things, but chose not to.
Yeah.
Which, I would, I think, it's better. Well, it's like Customary said to fucking Mike Tyson. The wise man can act the fool, but the fool can't act the wise man. Better to be educated.
Yeah.
And have the knowledge than never bother to be educated and never have the ability to step up your game.
Yeah.
You can make a decision then when you are educated as to whether you play this role or that role. And I was fortunate. I think I obviously I wanted to go in the army, and it was my Uncle Bill from an early age on my mum's side. My Uncle Bill He was in the Royal Anglican Regiment, and he started off as a private, and he ended up all the way through to a major.
Okay.
So he got commissioned and everything else. So I think it was kind of, when we'd have Christmas dues, like we'd go around, and he'd be in his uniform and all that type of thing, and talk to me about the army. So that's when my dad was ex-Navy during the Second World War.
Oh, okay.
My dad, we didn't find out until 6 months before he died that he actually, because he always used to say, my old man was like, yep, I was in Ceylon, or Sri Lanka as it is now, and that's it. He never said, I've got some photographs of him sat on 100 propellers and everything, in the Second World War, and he never said bugger all. You know what I mean? And then my stepbrother, my dad's first wife, Simon, he done some digging, and Dad had been decorated by the Australians because he was on the HMS Formidable, the British aircraft carrier, 50 miles off for like an hour, when all the kamikaze pilots and everything came in.
Really?
Dropping 500 pounders on the decks and all of that. So, and his photographs of him in the Australian War Museum, pulling pilots out of the wreckage. So he's also got Burma Star and everything else.
Yeah.
And he got, countless medals. So, it was, really fascinating. And he never said anything about it. Never, not a word. But he always said he went to the recruiting office, and they said, how old are you? He said, 16. They said, come back tomorrow when you're 18, son. That's what my dad did. So he fought in the Second World War when he was 16.
Yeah. But that was the way back then, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Loads of kids were...
Oh, yeah, loads of them turned around and said they were a lot older because it was, the thing they wanted to go and protect the country.
Yeah.
Dad ended up a petty officer in the Navy. Having found it out, years later, I was, made me quite proud. And I can understand him. As I was growing up, Dad was quite aggressive. Very, strict, uber strict. And to the point of where it was just fucking insane. And then when Dad had a drink, he'd get fucking aggressive and violent, to the point where I just couldn't wait to fucking get out of the house. You know what I mean? And that's why I spent most weekends, down in Latin Buzzard staying over at friends, because I just didn't want to be in the house. But years later, after being put through all of that, my old man apologised. Because he's like, right, sorry, I didn't realise what I was like. And he apologised. But then hearing about what he'd been through, and seeing all that carnage and everything else, you're suddenly like, Jesus Christ, man, you know what I mean? You can, and there was no therapy, no therapy or anything like that. You know what I mean? Just tucked it way back when, so it was on occasions it did surface. So understanding him, helped me. And it was then just like a moment where, as I say, for a man, he was born in 1927. So for a man in Tennyson Elephant and Castle in London, it was a shithole.
Yeah.
So for a man to be, of that age, to be able to apologise, and understand that is pretty incredible, because most guys have, stuck in their ways and haven't got the guts, or the nous to turn around and go, I was wrong. So I appreciate the fact that he did, and that kind of, for me, that wiped the slate clean. As I say, we ended up milk keys, going to school, playing rugby, so things were pretty cool.
And then what age did you join the army?
Well, again, with this, I wanted to, it turned around and I then wanted to join the Royal Marines, a bit more specialised, life at home was getting really, Dad was right on top of me all the time, right, when you leave school, you've got to get a job, listen, I said, I'm going to the army. Dad used to say, the only army you'll go is the bloody Sally army, you pussy. So I got put down all the time, and looking back, I can see that his dad probably done that. So it was a cycle, and he, constantly put me down, and then I went to the recruiting office when I was about 15 and a half, in Bletchley, and the Royal Marines were like, no, you've got to be 17 3/4. Whereas I went downstairs to the army and they said, we can get you in the junior leaders at 16, you've got 6 months. I was like, that sounded interesting. So I signed up to the junior leaders, the Royal Green Jackets junior leader training.
Okay.
And prior to that, Dad was obviously like, well, you've got to fucking still earn some money and bring it into the house. So I went to the job centre, and there was a spoke to the woman, and she was like, right, we've got a job here, working as a butcher. Oh right, okay, and she rang the chap up, on the phone, said, oh, I've got a young lad here that would be more than happy to come down, help. And he went, all I could hear on the phone was, are his fingernails clean? And I was like, howdy hell. Anyway, so he said, oh yeah. So he sent me down to Helan's. And it was just, I lived at the time with my parents at Blue Bridge. So it wasn't far, and I got in there and there's this old fella there, a big tall, he had a tattoo of a guardsman on his forearm. And he goes, right, what do you know about me? And I kind of looked at him and he went, right, fuck all then. I was like, okay. And he went, what do you think of swearing? And I didn't know fucking hell, I didn't know what to say. And he went, I swear all the fucking time, you'd have to put up with it. Anyway, Paul his name was, and he was an absolute fucking legend. You know what I mean? One of those people, who you kind of think is such a character, he was funny as you like, and I said, he goes, what do you want to be? You just want to be a dog's body? Do you want me to teach you how to butcher? And I was like, well, I like to, teach you how to butcher, and I thoroughly enjoyed the time there. And he said before, I got my guaranteed vacancy and date from the army. And he was like, right, he goes, if you don't want to join the army, this time next year you can be the manager of this place. I was only young, and it kind of, oh, fucking hell, but my heart was set, you know what I mean, Plus I had, it was funny because I had all my exams coming up, and, to be honest, because I've got that guaranteed vacancy, that certificate with my name on it, I was like, oh, God, you know what I mean, school fucking doing one, you know what I mean, and I just literally didn't give a shit. Because I knew where I was going, it's we got to 16, and the next thing I was on the train down to Winchester.
Okay.
So that's where I was, training was based. So prior to that, I mean, Mum and Dad had, took over a laundrette in Leighton Buzzard. Lived in Milton Keynes, but travelled over at Leighton Buzzard, and run their own business. And I was getting into a lot more scrapes and aggravation and things like that, and mainly finding myself standing up to bullies and things like that. I mean, it's a kind of cliche thing to say, stand up to bullies, but school was you get people, older kids and all that putting it on you and things like that, and I was I would put myself in a position for others just to try and say, no, fuck off, behave. You know what I mean? I'm not standing up. I'm not standing for that. I'm not going to be treated like a dick. You know what I mean? And I like to think, I gained some respect for that at school because I got left well alone after a couple of incidences where I did front, senior lads. You know what I mean? And they didn't want to fight me. And I was like, all right, fuck it, and I got left alone. Which was suited me fine. But so I was used to, on the weekend, we'd have fights on a rugby pitch. You know what I mean? Always, if there's a fight, it was a 15-man fight. You know what I mean? Until you get stuck in the tearing. But I did have quite a lot of scrapes, and being a rowdy teenager, with my pals, we were always, down the park fighting somebody else. Getting drunk. I mean, God, things that I used to love to do. I mean, this goes on to, as a kid, I used to love going camping. I mean, when I was 13, my old man bought me a sheath knife, 6-inch sheath knife for my birthday. I mean, you wouldn't hear that now. You know what I mean? A bloody great sheath knife, because I loved going up the woods. And making me little traps and shooting. I got an air rifle, so I'd be up the woods and fucking shoot rabbits. And I had a little tent, and but I'd make bivvy wax and all this type of stuff. And my mum would drive me just outside Leighton Buzzard, a place called Stock Grove, and on the opposite side of Stock Grove there's a place called King's Woods, Medieval Woods. Mum would drive me all the way from Leighton Buzzard, Blue Bridge, Milton Keynes, drop me off, and I'd say, right, I'll be back here, on Sunday at 3 o'clock. No mobile phone, no nothing. And that was like 13, 12, 13. And, I look back now and think, would I have fucking done that for a kid? Fuck, my mum and dad were like, we can never tell you, Cole, we can only advise you. Because you do what you wanted to bloody do anyway. You know, so I look back at it now and think, fucking hell, I must have been insane. All my combat kit on, my burger, me fucking, my air rifle, my sheath knife. You know, but I used to love it. And then me and my pals all used to go up there as well. But when we went up with my mates, it was more like on the lash. And,
Yeah.
You know, my mum was always the mum that would buy a crate of beer for us. Everyone else would be in their parents' drinks cabinets, nicking fucking booze.
Yeah.
You know, my mum and dad were like, "Yep, there you go, have a crate of that." You know, so yeah, I spent a lot of time. I used to love being out in the woods and stalking and shooting. I got a great thing with that is I got to see a lot of wonderful wildlife.
Yeah.
You know, and I love that. And if I wasn't into me, shooting and things like that, I never would have got to see badgers and monkeys and everything else. Just going about his business in the early hours. You know what I mean? Fantastic. Yeah.
There's something about we used to love doing that, and there's something about you just don't need it. No money. You just go and just do it.
That's it. Yes, fam. I loved it. I still love it now. But it was great as a precursor to the army because with an air rifle, obviously you've got to stalk rabbits and things like that. So just using those fieldcraft skills from that, moved across to the armed forces. Again, it's, just. And I used to love it. For me, it was just like, oh, this is great. I love doing these little fires going and then shooting rabbits and skinning them and cooking them up and that. Yeah, I used to. It's good times for me.
Yeah.
Well, as I say, I look back a bit now and I think, fucking hell, people was, who's that weird fucking lad that's living up the woods? You know what I mean? There's something not right there. And they were bloody right. So, yeah.
So when you went into the army then, were you living there?
Yeah, what happened was, you sign up. Now, normal training from normal soldier in the British Army was something like 3 or 4 months, I think. I can't remember that. But I was a junior leader trainer. They said, right, you're going into junior leaders, which is training you to be a non-commissioned officer. Okay, so basically a section commander. That's what they're training for you for. 46 weeks training. Okay, so the longest training of any a unit and force in Britain. So jumped on the train, got down to Winchester, stepped out of the train station. Right, you look like you're with us. Get on the back of the wagon. Jumped up into the back of the 4-tonner, and then they drove us up to camp. And fucking hell, you know what I mean? You can imagine how nervous that was.
Yeah, I was gonna.
16 years old. 90 recruits, right? All right, fucking horrible bastard screws. You know what I mean? We're talking, all in their combats and everything else. It's fucking brutal back then. You know what I mean? Who thinks they're hard? Because if you do want to take you around the back and beat the shit out of you, we'll teach you a lesson. And that's the way it was. Yeah. You know what I mean? You can imagine saying that there. Oh Christ! But it was mental, absolutely mental. Bullying was rife. You got 90 guys, all youngsters, lots of testosterone flying about, egos, and then you've got the screws on top of that, training staff, but it was funny because, for me, I being away, I spent so many years over there, being away from my parents, not years being around, but I was happy to get away from my parents. For me it was like, oh, thank God for that. You know what I mean? It was just hilarious because some of the lads, oh God, they're trying to scale the fences to escape and everything. And you're thinking, Jesus Christ, what do you think you're signing up for? Not the cadet force, you guys. You know what I mean? This is proper. So yeah, and it was
what happened when they got caught trying to escape?
Oh well, they get put on charges. So what that means is you get nicked and you get charged. You sit in front of the officer and they'll charge you, and they'll give you a disciplinary. Like you've got to appear every night down at the guardhouse, for inspection. And there were loads that they'd say, right, we're going to do an inspection every hour in a different type of dress. So combats, fatigues. Number 2s, number 1's barrack room dress, and you'd have to keep going back and forward, looking sharp. And if they pick you up, you'd get something, and it would just go on and on and on and on. I never did. I never had one of them. A show parade, they used to call it. That's it, show parade. Never got one. But as I say, it was, I just kind of kept myself to myself, to be honest. When I first got there, And then, they slowly whittle people down. And your first point is after 6 weeks or 12 weeks, something like that, you have a badge parade where you've, done, the platoon by that stage is knocked in half.
Yeah.
As I say, huge drop in numbers because people had, buggered off, or got kicked out because they weren't good enough. We've got the badge parade, and I remember Major Shute, the OC officer commanding the company, called me in to his office and said, Rifle Roberts, he said, see that queue over there? I looked at it, he goes, you're on lunch and that's the queue for the telephone. He goes, and there are lads there from your platoon that are bringing their parents. He goes, I've had a phone call from their parents. They haven't heard from you in 6 weeks. So I was like, he goes, I suggest you get over there and give them a bloody call. No, you're okay. And I was so fucking, I was like, oh shit. So, and again, that was just, for me, I was used to doing my own thing. But then, we had what they call the badge parade. So get awarded your berry and your badge. And your parents are invited down. So, mum and dad came down, and dad was over the moon. Really, really proud. Really, that changed everything. All of a sudden, my dad was, couldn't do enough for me.
Yeah.
It was fab. So that was cool. It was, I won't say it was fucking easy. It was proper. I look back now and go, how the flipping hell did I, get through that? And not just get through it, but get through it well.
Yeah.
As I say, I'd hate to have been a weak person because it was, rife. As the numbers slowly whittled down, we got the training. They eased off on the barrack room bullshit.
Yeah.
And taught you more skill, military skills, and how to command and things like that. But it was, I've seen geezers, thrown into the showers. This is why the training school was covered in vim and scrubbed with yard brushes. That's, it was, terrible.
What they covered in, sorry?
Vim. Oh, it's like a scouring powder.
Oh, right.
Awful shit.
And what's that, like a punishment? Or?
Yeah, punishment. Fucking you haven't had a shave. Fucking, and this is the type of place it was. It was, almost like a bit of it was a bit sick.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because you're like, fucking hell, that's but as kids, and we were. You know what I mean? You're like, Jesus Christ. People didn't fuck up because you got fucking hurt for it.
Yeah.
Or you got a good idea. That was the way it went. I suppose one thing for me was, I was at, looking back now at my behaviour at times, I was a perfectionist, and the Screws knew that, and I was in charge. I got made up to junior corporal within the junior leaders, and I was in charge of my section, and my section was on top.
Yeah.
The other three sections just weren't, up to the level that I'd got my lads to. And they, you'd give inspections all the time, locker room inspections, kit inspections, weapon inspections, everything. It's on top of you. And I remember I brought this, lad in who'd been in another section, and he was a constant fucking pain in me pal's arse. Always fucking up, locker room shit all over everything, And my Screws dumped him and said, right, it's your fucking job to train him up, get him up to standard. I was like, fuck, this is going to make me look a cunt. Really going to make me look a cunt. So I was a bit of a ruthless cunt. And that's when I look back at my mental health, and I think that is a massive precursor to fucking what I later became. For the mental health wise, like. And I was like, right, I'm going to deal with this. So I put him in the bed space next to mine, and a locker next to mine. And then we were out of the range. And then when you got the range, when you finish on the range, you have to make a declaration that you carry no live ammunition or anything like that. Well, I took some live ammunition, 5.56mm, fucking rounds, back into the block with me, back from the range. And we were doing probably drill weapons. So, you've got your weapon out from the armoury. And I sat there, and people sat on their beds just cleaning the weapons. and I loaded a magazine with a few rounds in it, everyone could see, stuck it into my fucking SA-80, stood up, walked over, fucking pinned him up against the wall, stuck my SA-80 in his belt, came along, cocked the weapon, took the safety off, pulled it for its first pressure on the trigger. I said, you fuck up and make me look bad, I will kill you. I will. And, you know, I look back at that, and that to me was like, shit, because sometimes I forget about shit like that, you know what I mean? And I thought, what a fucking terrible cunt I must have been. You know, and as I say, that precursor to that not having a huge amount of feelings for, you know, for people. Ultimately, I'd obviously bullied. You know, it's terrible. You know, I look back now, but you know, it did give him a kick up the fucking arse, and he passed out. You know, he passed out of training. You know, and only 20 of us did, from 90 down to 20.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, we, you know, as juniors, you know, we weren't allowed out of camp for 6 weeks. No TV, no nothing like that. You know what I mean? You know, you just fucking, you know. And then when we were allowed out of camp, it was at 10 o'clock in the morning till 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So, and you had to march up to the guard room, be inspected in your civvies before they let you out, and then let us out, and we'd go straight down the pub. And there was a pub in Winchester, I think the Westgate, and they knew we were, you know, underage, you know what I mean, you know, but we'd go in there and get fucking tanked up, and then stagger back into camp, like, you know what I mean, you know, trying to disguise it.
Yeah.
New memory thinking, you know, you have to march up to the guard room, right, give your name and number, you know, 9990683, you know what I mean, you know, number you never forget, and you know, and then they'd look at you, you know, and then you'd have to march back off to the barracks, you know, yeah, funny stuff, yeah.
And how long were you in the army for?
About 4 years, yeah. So we, you know, past that depot, I said I got into lots of scrapes and things like that, and you know, fighting with civvies, you know, all the time. In fact, I got my first ABH when I was in the army.
Okay.
We came back from operations on Ireland, and we were, remember Dave Williams, we were on the lash and let buzz, and some geezers kicked off, so we gave them a good hiding. And then we got nicked like fucking ABH, so little Dave. And, you know, yeah, so I turned up at Latin Buzzer Magistrates in my uniform, you know what I mean, trying to, you know, score the points, like, you know what I mean, you know. And my, at the time, my section, my officer, commanding the platoon, Captain Ball, had to come as well, you know. So he was pissed off, because he had to drive up from Surrey to come to Latin Buzzer to appear in court with me. And they gave me a big fine, you know what I mean, you know, so, and it didn't affect the military, you know, standing. So fucking, we you know, passed out, as I say, and on the day we passed out, ended up, you know, in the back of a van again, down to Dover, to Connaught Barracks, you know, after passing out. And I passed out, well, I did pass out best education and best section commander. Now there was another lad, Hadley, because we'd done junior Bisley shooting competition as juniors, and he won the whole shebang. It's all the other regiments, all the other, you know, army bits and pieces. And he got section sergeant. And the screws were like, because he won junior Bisley, they wanted to be their poster boy for the, you know, for recruitment camp.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was happy enough getting best section commander award, because that's what I was there for. You know what I mean? You know. So I got back, I passed out of depot, and you know, we you know, got down to Connaught Barracks in Dover, and jumped off the van, walked into the guard room, and I can't remember who was on guard that time. He went, "Don't bother unpacking your kit. You got to Northern Ireland on Monday." So he was like, "Oh, right, okay." For me, I fucking was like buzzing, because I was like, yes. Some of the other lads were a bit like, "Oh shit," you know. Rung me mum and said, "All right, mum, yeah, I'm off to what? Yeah, off to Northern Ireland." You know what I mean? You know, so, and that was the case. You know, so we at the time I was only 17, you know, 17 quarter, something like that. So because you can't go out in the streets there till you're over 18, so I flew out to Omagh, where our 2nd battalion were, which is like a residential camp, which is a softer area. Yeah. You know, my battalion, were in South Omagh, which is bandit country, where you don't fucking come out of that camp in any green vehicles, nothing. You fly out in choppers. You know?
Oh, okay.
So I, we're out there and done my Northern Ireland training. So I've done all my right, mental time, right training, stuff like that. You know what I mean? You built up villages just specifically for the army.
Really?
Yeah, and you fucking, you're on patrol and all of a sudden they use as like rioters or other army units. So they get tanked up and come out and, you fucking, you don't get on with army units as it is, but then they're throwing bloody plastic bullshit bricks and it's full on. Petrol bombs coming over. And it does get the old adrenaline's pumping, it's great fun. You know what I mean? With the riot shields and going in with the snatch squads and clumping people. Yeah, it was, it's really enjoyable, to be honest. But it's nice to be able to have that experience.
Yeah.
And, all different stuff to do with Northern Ireland training and, the skills you need to, execute your job out there. And I really enjoyed it. And, it was, we'd do at, I remember coming out the camp, I needed a pair of trainers. I say Omar was classed as a safe, because you've got Union, loyalists and the Catholics, so we we could go out of camp and we had to go to a certain shoe shop to be able to buy trainers because they were loyalists. So I come out of camp, walk down the road, car pulls up, 7 3/4, 3 geezers, you're fucking dead, you British bastard. I was like, oh shit, this is fucking, I've done nothing wrong. Anyway, I remember we worked as juniors at the, we still classed as juniors, to your 18, and they used to use us as fucking like dogs' bodies. I remember there was the dog handling team on site, the dogs patrol around the camp, and we had to put the body armour on and run for this fucking great big Rottweiler called Samson, and we were like fed to him, you know what I mean? Run, away you go, lads. And I remember this fucking great, he used to bite the back of your bloody hamstring. And you had all the kit on, but you could fucking feel his teeth and drag you down and drag you back. Oh, such a joy. Can't wait to go to fucking proper camp, you cunts. You're fucking eating my dogs every day. And it was, to me, as I say, a bit of dog's body stuff. But then on your 18th birthday, so on my 18th birthday, got put in a Toyota Hiace van, and they had all the back of the van stuck on with sweet boxes and things like that. So it looked like it was a confectionery wagon, somebody doing a cash and carry on. But inside were us, because you remember covert. So we got driven down, and I think we flew into South Armagh. South Armagh, as I said, bandit country. You don't come out of places where we were, Besbrook Mill. You don't come out and drive away.
Yeah.
You have to be in a chopper. You know what I mean? Because there's no green vehicle movement on the road in case you've got to blow it up. Because one thing was, the British government for years had suppressed any news coming out of Northern Ireland because they didn't want people to think that the IRA was strong as they were.
Yeah.
But it's, I've seen stuff over there where, there's a place called Strabane, and I remember as a youngster driving through there in the armoured Land Rovers, and all the curbstones apart with a tricolour for the IRA supporters, flags up everywhere, and they came out, mate, and they just start fucking throwing rocks and throwing fucking, just absolute carnage. You're like, fucking, this is unbelievable, because you don't think it's that bad until you get out there and you understand it, Now, it was, so it was an eye opener, and just going on patrols and things. I did used to enjoy it. You know what I mean? It was, I used to love it when you get weapons tight over the radio, which means there's people like the SAS on the ground.
Oh, really?
In your area operating. So if you see anything untowards out in Ulu, not to fucking shoot it, because it's potentially fucking special ops site.
Yeah.
So stuff like that, and getting to meet guys that were the bearded hippies we used to call them, guys that were in the regiment and that, fucking brilliant.
They're like next level, aren't they?
Oh, unbelievable. I mean, these people are fucking, proper naughty geezers. But, but so kind of relaxed and, again, I remember we'd done a large exercise in Thetford, and we'd been on the wagons, driving, still scorching day, driving the wagons all the way to Thetford, all disembarked off the wagons, like full kit and everything else, into an aircraft hangar. And our officer command in the battalion was a Lieutenant Colonel. He said currently there are more Royal Green Jackets, former Royal Green Jackets, serving in the SAS than any other regiment. You know, I was like, oh right. He goes, so in that, in the spirit of that, we're going to do a fucking ICFT, with full kit. So, you know, you got, you know, I literally, you know, people's helmets, you know, you got your webbing, your rifle, your helmet, Bergen, and at the time I was anti-tank, so I had fucking missile fucking tubes on my back and everything. You know, to the point where you used to lay on the floor, lay back on the floor, and you have to get, and people would have to pull you up so you could stand upright like that, and then you'd be expected. I think we've done 8 miles in about an hour and 10 with full kit. Fucking, I collapsed at the end. It was one of the days I've been sat in a wagon for hours, dehydrated. You know, I mean, just weren't you know, not the best precursor to doing a bloody an 8 miler. But yeah, it was fun. But as I say, and then from Northern Ireland came back and found myself out in Norway.
Okay.
Doing Arctic warfare.
Yeah.
I'd always want to go to the jungle. Just one of them fucking jungle fucking Rambo and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, man, that's fucking brilliant. And there was another lad, Shag Sharman, and he, the boss said, right, we've got a space to go to the jungle, Belize, and we've got a space to accompany the, I think it was a Duke of Wellington's regiment. They're currently doing Spearhead Battalion for NATO. Now, we want someone to go out there, or part of a team that goes out there, to learn about, the vehicles, the movement, your Arctic warfare and everything else. And then so when we take over that role, we've got people experienced. So we're like, okay, toss a coin, I lost. I ended up going to the Arctic. So I was like, oh, fucking hell. You know what I mean? So we ended up, at the Arctic and learn, the first thing to do is learn to survive in that temperatures.
Yeah.
It's not about fighting, it's learn to survive. Because the environment's the enemy.
Yeah.
Done all the skiing, the sledge pulling, the pulse diving in the bloody holes. I've probably seen it on telly over the years. A big square cut out in the ice. It's funny because the only people that do that are the British Army. The Norwegians don't do it.
Really?
You know what I mean? They said you're bloody mad. It's not something we do. So
what's that for? What's the reason?
Right, basically they cut a big hole. It's probably from there to here, that size, and a little ramp in there, each end with snow, and you put your cam whites on, your Bergen over one shoulder, and you got your ski poles in your hand, and you just slide in, kick your skis off, and they float. You know what I mean? And you have to swim along, and then you dump your Bergen out halfway. You have got a rope around your waist, just in case you go under the ice, and then you swim the rest of the way, and then you get your ski poles, and you pull yourself out the other end and roll in the snow, and then fucking your nads never see the light of day ever again. It's that fucking cold. And it's the army counts it as character building stuff, but it's the Norwegians are like, why do you do this? It's obvious. If you get in the cold water, you get yourself out. Yeah. But it is just, it's one of those army things. Everyone has to do it, and everybody has to do it. I remember seeing the lieutenant colonel go in, and his face went bloody blue, and and you could tell he couldn't turn around and go, oh shit, this is fucking horrible, because he's in a position he's got to brass it out like, bless him, and he did. But everyone has to do it. The Norwegians think we're mad for doing it. So and living in snow holes and digging your own snow hole and all that, and it's really fascinating stuff. And it really
probably taught you so much as well.
Oh god, yeah. I mean, learning learning to survive in them conditions. I wasn't the greatest skier. Fortunately for me at the time, I'd just done boxing training, so I was really fit. Because as soon as you get into the mountains out there, the oxygen is so thin. Yeah. It's such a taxing thing. But as I say, I grew to enjoy being out in the Arctic, because the thing is, most of the time you're not wet, it's just fucking cold. But you can wrap up to get warm. Whereas I think someone once said about the British Army that why they're the best in the world is because we train in the most horriblest conditions, and if you can soldier when you're wet, then you can soldier bloody anywhere. being dry and all that, it's nothing in comparison to being piss wet through, like it is if you're in the Brecon Beacons or down on Salisbury Plain. You know, you know, up at Kilda Forest, you know what it is to soldier hard.
Yeah.
So you have the skills to, you know, and I say the Arctic as a rule isn't wet. It's just, you know, you've got to, you know, little things like, you know, brushing the snow off yourself. Because if your snow stays on you, just, you know, it will melt and make you wet. So you just have a brush, like a bloody dish brush, in my pocket, tied on with a lanyard, you know, sweeping yourself down right, so you keep it in. But yeah, I mean, it was an interesting place. Yeah. And then obviously I was with the Duke of Wellingtons. I think I done 3 months out there, and then came back, and then it was our turn to go out there. So our regiment was then becoming, or our battalion was then becoming spearhead battalion for NATO in the Arctic. You know, in case the Russians came through the top of Norway. You know, so we were there to sort that. So it was, you know, as I say, you know, it was interesting stuff. You know what I mean? You know, yeah, cool. Let's just take a break. Drink water. Yeah, I can fucking go. I'm stuck. It's funny because I'm going through this, and I'm thinking, fucking hell, there's stuff. You know, all the fights you used to get in the yard, I'm fucking spoken about, like, you know what I mean? You know, and all that. So it's funny because Chris was saying it. I'm just thinking things as I'm going through. Yeah.